Over the past several weeks since the draft, you have been hearing from local reporters who cover the New Orleans Saints on a regular basis. We've shared plenty of thoughts on what the team might need to do or will do before training camp begins in a little less than 2 months. But we thought it was time to go outside our comfort zone and grab unbiased analysis from one of the leading football handicappers on the planet. Indeed, our old friend Adam Chernoff is here to share his thoughts on the biggest differences he sees with the install of a new offense, why Klint Kubiak will do the things that haven't been done with this offense since before the Sean Payton era. Good, bad, not so good, not so bad. What do we think? We're going to discuss it along with Saints odds, including over-unders for Derek Carr, as well as a couple other over-unders from across the NFL that we might like that we tell you to play now. And I'll also have a short preview on this morning's LSU-Wofford game. It's all coming up next on the Dattitude podcast.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? Hello to all my friends elsewhere, everywhere, out there who already have their LSU rally caps on. How do you wear your rally cap, by the way? You wear it backwards, sideways, kind of tilted, holding it on your head, look like a chicken. I mean, how do you wear your rally? There are so many different ways to wear a rally cap. But are you that nervous already? Just game one of a regional. Plenty more of these to go. At least you hope there are. We're going to get there. I promise. Hang tight. There are, I guess, Gabe says he wears his inside out. Yeah. Breaking news of sorts this morning. We're going to get to it in just a minute. First, let me tell you that this is Dattitude. You know that. That's why you came here. Dattitude episode number 245 presented by Evangeline Securities for a Friday, May the 31st, 2024. I'm your host, Jim Derry. Whether you're watching on one of our social media channels or just listening to the podcast after the fact, you already know who's the starting pitchers are this morning. Then I'm not telling you to skip through the next couple minutes, but you can, because that's what I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Whether you're watching on one of our NOLA.com social media channels or wherever you're watching, we thank you for being a part of the Dattitude family. All right. The news of the morning, if you're looking for LSU news, as we told you, Adam Chernoff's coming up. We're going to be talking about that. But Gage Jump is officially starting for the LSU Tigers this morning. David Bordelon says he wears his backwards inside out. Man, that's too hard. Good morning, David. Thank you for joining the show. That seems like a lot of work. You got to pull it inside out, kind of, and then you got to struggle. Put it. Nah. I just kind of like move it to the side a little bit. I think kind of diagonally. I don't know. Hopefully you won't need that today. By the way, so Gage Jump is starting. Let's put this up for a second. Gage Jump is starting for LSU, and more of breaking news than Gage Jump starting, because I think we all expected that, is Wofford just like throwing in the towel with game one and saying, you know what? We're going to do our best to climb out of the losers. But this is a weird move to me. They are not starting their ace. His name is Zach Cowan. I joked with a friend of mine, Todd Cowan, I play poker with a lot, lives up here in the North Shore with me, been friends for a while, that his little brother or his little nephew is pitching for Wofford. No, it's not Zach Cowan, who was the, I forget whatever even conference they're in. I'm having a brain fart this morning. Whatever conference they won to get into this tournament, it's the same conference as the College of Charleston, and I'm drawing a blank. Somebody help me. Gabe, someone, anyone. Anyway, they are not starting their ace. The Southern Conference. There you go. Thank you, Gabe. I was brain fart on a Friday morning. They are going with a guy named Branton Little. In fact, I have the entire starting lineup here for the LSU Tigers. Let's see if I can read this without my glasses on. it's not any surprise. Their lineup is pretty similar to what it's been. Braswell, White, Jones, Josh Pearson in the cleanup spot, Travinsky batting 5th. Monster Milam is batting 6th. Bingham in the 7th slot and playing center field. Ashton Larson playing right field, batting 8th. He needs to get going, by the way. And Alex Milazzo, the catcher, batting 9th. Again, Gage jumped 3.42 ERA, 6-1 record. Let's see, 89 strikeouts to 20 walks. Now, their starter, Brandon Little, has a 4.76 ERA. So I guess they're going to have a bullpen day. He's only got 39 2/3 innings pitched on the year, 26 strikeouts against 21 walks. I find that very interesting. I understand what you're trying to do if you're the Wofford coach, but to me that screams we're giving up the ghost. We're just gonna lose, gonna get our asses kicked on day one and climb out of the regional and hope North Carolina beats LSU. Is that what you're trying to do? Don't you try to win game one and then you worry about whether I can tell you right now for LSU, it's gonna be important to not only win game one but win game two. That's why. You'll see Luke Holman tomorrow, assuming that they play North Carolina. I think if somehow Long Island pulls the upset of upsets, then you wouldn't see Luke Holman. But you got to, for this LSU team, I think we saw just because they won as many games they won, made it to the championship of the SEC tournament. You got to remember as they went along, they were playing teams that were also didn't have their ace. So this team, the 1 and 2, Jump and Holman are maybe as good as any team in the country. I mean that sincerely. So if you can get into the winner's bracket, into Sunday's winner's bracket, and have a leg up on everybody else, and somebody has to beat you twice, of course you would love LSU's chances. Who wouldn't? This morning, as always, if you're watching live, you can be a part of the show, as David did just a minute ago, by typing in your comment, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Twitter. X and Twitter are the same thing. I don't know what they're calling these days. We will show it on the screen, talk about it here. You're listening after the fact, any number of places. You can listen to us via podcast afterward, wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify. Send me a comment, jderry@theadvocate.com, and a reminder to subscribe to our YouTube page if you have not done so already, our ever-growing YouTube page. Blaze, hello. Good morning to you. So you guys... I mean, I know a lot of people come here to talk about this. We have such a mixed bag here in Dattitude. See, the numbers change all the time. Sometimes the numbers change when we stop talking about LSU. Sometimes the numbers change when we start talking about the Saints. It's like it's a mixed bag. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be a mixed bag here on the Dattitude podcast. Last day of May 31st. Is that hard to believe? I mean, for me, it's a good thing in the sense of we're getting to the nitty-gritty in college baseball, which is fun. Even when LSU's in it, I find myself it's something about college baseball. I'm not in love with the regular season. I don't watch every series. Even LSU, I don't watch every series. I watch it in the early part of the season, and then I kind of lose focus a little bit in the middle, and then at the end, I pick it up again. And that's kind of where I was with this LSU team. Rocky's with us. Go Tigers. Go Tigers. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. So Gage jump starting, and their ace isn't. And if you can't win this game, you're in a whole world of hurt if you're LSU. Odds to win, you see there on the left side of the screen. LSU, they haven't changed. They're still plus 110 to win the regional. I think today's game, obviously, you need to win. Tomorrow is kind of the story. I don't think there's going to be a loser. I don't think there's going to be a loser's bracket thing. I think whoever wins tomorrow, assuming it's LSU or North Carolina, and LSU is about a 3-1 favorite this morning going into the Wofford game. That was before they announced they weren't using their ace. So what are they now? I don't know. Doesn't matter. You got to win this game. If the Tigers win today, they will play tomorrow at 4 p.m. again, almost certainly against North Carolina. If they lose, they somehow were to lose and get in that lose bracket, they got to play early again tomorrow. So go and win the damn thing. Plus 900 at DraftKings. But as I was talking about earlier this week, The Tigers actually are you get better odds, way better odds at like a FanDuel. They were like 20-1 at FanDuel. Blaze, you're a semi-pro football coach. Team's going to the playoffs. You're 10-0. So you've got other playoffs in mind besides LSU, right? What else is good about June? Always go on vacation in June. At some point, it's my wife's birthday. It's Father's Day. All kinds of good stuff about June. The only bad news is I got to talk about the weather this morning. You don't have to worry about it. But the heat, yeah, it sucks. That blast of the furnace, although we're getting a little bit of a relief right now. It's been a weird intro to summer for sure. All right, a little bit more about LSU coming up in just a second, but give me just a moment to tell you about my friends at Evangeline Securities, tell you how they can help you figure out the rest of your life. What do I mean, Derry? Derry, what do you mean? If you're pondering selling your business or even know someone in this situation, then you need to get in touch with managing directors Nick Braden and Ron Hemel. I have been telling you how they came back from the Big Apple and home to New Orleans. Yes, after years of going to fancy business schools, they would have kicked me out of those business schools. After lunch on the first day, they would have said, Derry, what the hell are you doing here? How did you get in here? They would have kicked me out. Then Nick and Ron, they went and hustled and bustled the Wall Street world. They came back home to the people they care about most. Their company will start you off with a complimentary service that includes a detailed evaluation of your business to figure out its worth. You want to get out? You want to retire? You want to go lay on the beach? You want to watch LSU from the sand on your phone? Do it. Talk to Nick and Ron. Take as much time. They'll take as much time as you need to go through their findings with you and share their thoughts. If you decide to proceed, Nick and Ron will find you a buyer by beginning an extensive auction process that involves established private equity funds from across the world. They will maximize the return process for the founder of your company and the founder's family. And then you'll take an early 7-0 lead on the hated Dirty Birds. Wait a minute. That's me dreaming about the season already. Yeah, that's fine. They can do that. Now, you'll be way ahead. You'll be more ahead than 7-0. You might be up like 28-3 or something like that. The only difference is Nick and Ron know how to finish the deal. Check them out. We'll talk more about them later in the show. www.evangelinesecurities.com. Okay, LSU, before we get to the Saints, Mike Prima says, Tigers about to win the Chapel Hill Regional. Getting a little ahead of ourselves. Now, Gabe is telling me that Christian Little, not the Little that's pitching for Wofford, but Christian Little, remember he got hurt last week, kind of stumbled off the mound. We were wondering what his availability is. Street clothes. So he will not be able to pitch, according to our own Cokie Riley, who was on this show just a couple weeks ago. We're going to talk more about LSU, of course, on Monday, especially if they win. We might spend a whole show on Monday talking about LSU. If they win, we'll see. Working on a guest right now. Don't have it confirmed. I know Larry Holder is coming on next week. Larry will be on. We'll talk about the Saints. That's next Friday. Not sure who my Wednesday guest is. So we got some things going on before I go on vacation. 6 more shows until vacation. Another great thing about June. But what do we think about the Saints? Look, we're going to spend some time this morning. Before I get to Adam, let me just, if you haven't been a regular on this show or you didn't watch way back when, because it's been a while since we had Adam on. Adam has come on and he's become a little bit, I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but he's become too big to come on this show as often as he used to come on. Let's put it that way. He spent almost an entire second half of the summer with me 2 years ago, and we were doing NFL previews. And the way that I have been doing my NFL previews is give you about a 7-8 minute intro. I'm not going to do that this year. It's probably be a little bit shorter than that this year, but give you about a 7-8 minute intro. And then at the end, I would spend about a minute giving you my thought on what the best value was. I would give you a predicted record, which obviously leads to their over under, whatever the team is. And then I would have Adam come on and critique me and tell me whether he thought I was right, wrong, or we were in sync together. And so again, we couldn't do it last year, but he's got a new business going on that's kind of taken off. Right Angle Sports, by the way. AdamChernoff.com. You want to check him out. Dude knows what he's talking about. But I was listening to another show earlier in the week about, and these are from like two of the top handicappers across the country. There's no question about it. And they were talking about Adam Chernoff on their show. Good morning, Jerry. Thank you for joining us as always. We welcome our friend Jerry. We love Jerry. So anyway, Adam is coming on, and we're going to talk about the Saints. And he's on his previews. He's done some early previews. He talks about Klint Kubiak and the biggest difference in Klint Kubiak's offense and what you might see here. And you know what I think about Pete Carmichael. So there are some major changes that are coming in. The questions are, to me, can they get this install in early enough to where everything's going to flow? That's where when I keep talking about how the early part of this schedule and how it's tough, it's not just because I think this team is going to have a tough time coming out of a spot to where if they have a 1-4 or 1-5 start, that they won't be able to climb out of that hole. I mean, not really. Honestly, 1-5, no one, even the Kansas City Chiefs would have a tough time climbing out of a 1-5 hole. So that's why it's important to being Captain Obvious to start 2-3. But when you're talking about installing a new offense and you already have pieces of your offense that haven't been there. I mean, Demario Davis spent earlier this week, he was talking about how he was a little upset that some of the starters haven't been there in OTAs. It's voluntary OTAs. They don't have to be there. But wouldn't you think if you're a player after the couple of seasons that you've had with this team, unless you're just injured and you don't want to take a chance, don't you think you would want to be here after what you've gone through the past couple of years? I think that's what bothers me. And you look at some of the other teams, and I'm not saying every team. I'm not saying you can't win a Super Bowl if you don't show up at OTAs. Okay, I'm not saying you can't win your division if you got players who don't show up for OTAs. I know it happens. But why even have them? Why is there a voluntary OTA? Either have them and everyone should be there, or don't have them. I don't get it. So that's why when we talked Wednesday about the potential of training camp being changed and the talks with the union about maybe getting rid of OTAs and you just have time off and you go from the end of the season. Now, you're asking a lot of your players. I get it. And they make it, they're out of shape or whatever when they come in here. And that's how it used to happen in the old days. I don't think that would happen nearly as much as it would happen before. I think you would see players working out on their own. You know what? A lot of them working out on their own anyway. They want to become fat slobs in the offseason. That's to their own detriment. I don't know. And starting training camp either end of June or early July. And you basically have 2 full months to train. A lot of things can happen in 2 months. It would be a scary proposition. Maybe you don't go at it as hard early on. I don't know. But there's got to be an answer, and I'm just not a fan of voluntary anything. You don't have voluntary OTAs. I mean, I don't have – do you have in your job where you have 4 weeks of your job where you don't have to come if you don't want to? You don't feel like coming? Nah, we don't need you. We'll figure it out. I don't. Doing this for 34. I've never had a boss tell me, we're going to be doing this week, but you don't, unless you're on vacation, you don't have to come if you don't want to. I mean, maybe every now and then some meeting or something, but not for a week. And they have, 4 weeks of this? Doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not blaming anyone at the Saints because that's the way that it is in the NFL. I'm just saying in general, voluntary OTAs mean, I think I can do better training on my own. How did that work out for Zion Williamson, by the way, when he was working out on his own for the Pelicans? Pelicans started changing things, didn't they? Look, I know Zion got hurt at the end of the season as I kind of jump around, but I'm using this as an example. I just don't think that I know my body better than you do. Okay. But guess what? This is the way we're doing it. And I just think that works better. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But let's get to Adam and his thoughts. And I think you're going to really enjoy this interview. It lasts about 40 minutes. It's almost all Saints. Again, I wanted to get an outsider's point of view on where the Saints are right now. And his point of view on Klint Kubiak and the biggest differences between him and Pete Carmichael. You can insert joke there. I'll just let you do that as we start the show. Let's start the interview. Welcoming in on this Friday morning, great way to end the week here in the Dattitude podcast presented by Evangel Securities, is our old friend Adam Chernoff, who, he was one of our early guests here. He was a friend to the old Bayou Bet show, and we once spent half of a summer going through my over-under win totals, projected over-under win, and I would say that I think we both did pretty well. It's been a couple good years for both of us, but Adam, I'm not just trying to toot your horn here, but you, not that you weren't before, but now you have become one of the top handicappers when it comes to the NFL and going through and breaking down. And the reason why is because you are so detailed. You know every offensive coordinator, you know every defensive coordinator, you know every detail, and you study these things relentlessly. And I honestly don't know how you have a personal life.
Well, okay, we just end the show there. That was a good enough endorsement. I'll take it. I'll go. That's okay. I'm concerned to go on, but it's a lot of work, Jim. Good to be back chatting with you, and it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So hopefully there's some value to be shared here with Saints fans.
Well, I know one way that you do it, and you and I, even though you haven't been on the show a lot recently, we stay in touch because
now you're making me feel bad.
Well, no. You'll ask me questions via text about something that maybe I've seen in New Orleans, and I would imagine you have a large outreach of people you're in touch with all 32 NFL teams that you're able to ask their local opinion on what they've seen, and that's one way to be able to get a gauge on what each team is able to do.
I try my best to have as many of those as possible. I wish it was more. I was a little bit more connected. So it's an equal part trying to get, stuff that's not necessarily out there, but then also interpret and filter a lot of the stuff that is. So it's the subjectivity part of handicapping and betting, I think, is relatively underutilized because there's not a clear path, but I try to navigate it best possible.
Well, we're going to spend 90% of this segment here on the New Orleans Saints and your take on what you see about them. I may ask you one or two questions real quick about maybe a value on someone else as we go off here this morning. But Adam Chernoff, Right Angle Sports, you can find him at adamchernoff.com. Got great things going on. I encourage everyone to check out what Adam's got going on and all his insight and his group's insight, Right Angle Sports. Okay, the Saints. Now, when you look at these numbers, and I want to start off with the win total of over under 7.5. And I went into this before the schedule release saying that I thought that and this number hasn't budged, it hasn't moved hardly at all since it came out. And I would say that going into the schedule release, I thought that if the Saints had a easier schedule early on in the season, that it would allow them to be able to navigate with this new offense and a new offensive coordinator in Klint Kubiak, that they would be able to get some cohesiveness and maybe find some work for that offensive line to get together, and the running backs can figure out what they're supposed to do and maybe navigate it, get off to a quick start, and then find a way to beat those tougher teams later in the season. However, they got exactly the opposite. And I don't know that there are a couple schedules that are tough early on, but I would say that the Saints, obviously not the Carolina game to open the season, but 1 through 5, if you go through their first 5 weeks of the season, I would challenge anyone to find a tougher start than the Saints have to start this 2024 season.
Yeah, so it's Cowboys, Eagles, Falcons, Chiefs, maybe not in
Correct.
That order, but those are four.
That is the order,
right?
Yeah, that is the order, 2 through 5.
Yeah, that's as bad as it gets. And, I guess what worries me a little bit is listening to Kubiak as he goes through off-season workouts here, and he's done a couple press activities so far, and we got a pretty good press conference from him about a week or so ago. It wasn't him speaking as like a super optimistic coordinator. It was a lot of still kind of, we're working through things, we're figuring things out, the install is going well so far. It's not like some other coordinators that are coming out and saying like everything's clicking, everything's working. And so that kind of makes me wonder a little bit, because it's such a large change when you go from a guy like Carmichael, who's been there for 50 years. Hasn't been 50 years, but
well, it sure seems like
whatever. I bet it sure has for Saints fans. But it's
18.
a huge change for sure, and it doesn't sound like it's all the way there yet.
No, and in fact, our Saints Insider guys were talking earlier this week about how this install that you just mentioned is going to come in 6 parts, and they're just starting the 3rd part. So you're talking about trying to get 6 parts of an install in before training camp begins a little less than 2 months from now.
It's tough, and it's not like a massive shift personnel wise, but just requirement wise, what's coming in from the scheme side of things. There's a lot of different parts and a lot of guys that are going to be involved in different ways. So hearing that makes me a little bit more concerned than I perhaps was coming into this.
And look, we'll talk about the over-under again in just a minute. But I watched. You have a preview, a little mini early preview on all the teams. I know you have 4 parts. You have more coming. So, but the Saints you talked about the Saints, I think 2 weeks ago. And I went back and rewatched it again. I had watched it when it came out, and then I rewatched it again last night. You had some interesting points on Klint Kubiak, and you talk about, for people that are under the age of 40, they probably don't even remember a Saints offense really without Pete Carmichael being a part of it. So you're talking about drastic changes and you're trying to build here. And the thing I think that I found most interesting when you're talking about the specifics of the change is going from a system in which you use 2 tight ends, which the Saints did a lot under Pete Carmichael, and never 0% used more than 1 running back in the backfield, to a Klint Kubiak system that is going to be more of a 1 tight end system and a 2 running back system, kind of probably where Taysom Hill fits in, right? He's a hybrid. He may become a fullback, a Kyle Juszczyk sort of player, if you will. But that is not just a subtle change, Adam. That is something that is going to take some time to learn. We just talked about the 6-part install. And I don't know that you can learn that in the early. This is going to be kind of going through the preseason and into the regular season almost.
It definitely will. So I think a good way to kind of explain what the Saints offense could be, and the way that I deemed it, was 49ers light. And I'm putting emphasis on the light, I think, skill and expectation wise. But Kubiak worked with Kyle Shanahan last season in San Francisco, and he said that the offense he wants to run with the Saints is one that was heavily influenced by his time in San Francisco. As young as he is, this is his 2nd go around as an offensive coordinator. And I tend to like that a little bit better than like a really young first-time coordinator trying to get it right, because it's a chance to kind of step back into a role and adjust things differently, trying to do it again. And the fact that he's back as an offensive coordinator again by himself, I think shows that there's teams in the league, specifically the Saints, that value what he can bring. And so, like you said, when you think about what the 49ers did more than any other team last year, it was have multiple running backs in the backfield, whether it was 2 running backs, a running back and a fullback, and used a ton of pre-snap motion, highest rate in the league. And so when you think about how that might look with the Saints, certainly no shortage of running backs on the roster. You have the fullback in position as well. It makes a lot of sense to how that can work. And you kind of see tells that that's really what Kubiak wants to try replicate because of who is on the roster and how it's being built. Where I think this could be a little bit problematic, especially through the install and early season, is now you have these changes on the offensive line, and communication pre-snap is a massive part of this offense, because the reason you have those backs in the backfield is to do things with motion, to get the defense to tip their hand a little bit, to set up leverage that works for your offense. And if that motion is slowing things down and the communication's not quite as well as it should be, and you have kind of guys all over the place, it encourages penalties, and it could also kind of bog things down quite a bit from a production standpoint. So it's a fine line between it working and not. And it doesn't sound like, so far as we sit here on May 30th, that it's going seamlessly to get to that level. So there's a lot of questions for me around it.
Oh, I'm going to get to the offensive line in just a second, but I do want that there's one positive to me here with this change is early on here in OTAs, we've seen Taysom Hill become I don't want to say larger part because he was already a large part, but taking more reps in the backfield. And again, maybe becoming a Kyle Juszczyk. And you might say that's not a sexy position, but for San Francisco, it was obviously important. And Kyle Juszczyk did play a large role. But now you're talking about a guy in Taysom Hill who can line up. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fullback. He can also play tight end at times and kind of be kind of this hybrid guy. Also, we see him play wide out at different times. But I think Taysom Hill is kind of a big key and kind of maybe a key that people aren't necessarily going to talk about a whole lot, even though he gets this large recognition for being a Swiss Army knife. I think he plays a large role, a much larger role in the Klint Kubiak offense than he did in the Pete Carmichael offense.
Yeah, it could definitely be a lot more impactful too. I think an easy way to think about it, again, if you put Taysom Hill in San Francisco this season, just hypothetically, what would that look like?
Right.
And I think everybody watching could see how that could be very exciting. Now, will the execution with the Saints be as effective? No, probably not. But just in terms of the way that he could be used, how they might utilize him, sounds like there's a lot more usage of him specifically in the backfield at either running back or fullback. So far, he's being moved around a lot. That's exciting. It could work. Is it going to flip this offense from one of the biggest under teams the last couple of seasons to a massive over team? No, I don't think so. But it's certainly fun to think about how he's going to be used.
Dattitude podcast this Friday morning. Here speaking with Adam Chernoff. Show is presented as always by Evangeline Securities. The offensive line there. I thought it look. Well, let's just be straight up. Last year they were unquestionably one of the 4 or 5 worst offensive lines in the NFL. And I would argue, I understand they went out and drafted Taliesin Fuanga, and that's great. But I think that because of losing Anders Pete, it's almost a wash. And they're in a situation now where I think they're worse right now. If they don't go out and get a veteran free agent a la David Bakhtiari or someone along those lines, I think that they actually could be worse. You're talking about moving a Fuanga to his native right tackle to play left tackle because you don't have anyone else that can play left tackle. But meanwhile, Ryan Ramczyk, it looks like he's going to miss at least at bare minimum the early part of the season and maybe the entire season. So you're talking to put a bunch of journeymen all over the place, except for Eric McCoy at center and Cesar Ruiz, who's been average at best at right guard. So, I mean, to me, the one positive that you talked about is maybe Klint Kubiak's offense. You don't need the offensive line to be as good as you needed them under Pete Carmichael. But still, if you're talking about a potentially one of the worst offensive lines in the league, when you're installing a new offense, I don't know how you get around that.
Okay, so my first question, I'm throwing back at you. So Ramczyk do you have like a strong opinion on how long he misses? Because I'm a little bit uncertain there.
I think the inner feelings between the media members amongst here in New Orleans, the vast majority is, I think the most people's consensus is there's at least a 50-50 chance that he doesn't play at all this season. And I think that an overwhelming majority thinks that he's not ready for week 1. However, that being said, the fact that they've moved Fuanga to left tackle, some in the media have interpreted that to mean that they think that Ramczyk could be ready. But I think they're going to try to rejuvenate Trevor Penning and put him at right tackle. That's kind of what it's looking at right now. I just don't think just the fact that he re-signed for basically he restructured his contract to take the minimum to come back for this year tells me a lot that he doesn't think he's going to be ready to play, at least not early on.
So Fuaga goes left tackle, Penning goes right tackle. It's
as of now,
position switch for both of those guys, and they're obviously at 2 key spots.
Trying to protect Derek Carr's backside.
So on paper, as you lay it out, it sounds very concerning, and I agree that it is. The one kind of counterpoint that I would throw out there is if you think about this system, the 49ers made the Super Bowl and needed a defensive stop on 1 of 3 drives to win the Super Bowl with an offensive line that was criticized all season for how poor it was. The Rams, for basically the entire McVay tenure, have had a very poor offensive line that was average or below. Mike McDaniel in Miami, another offensive line not highly regarded in any way. So these guys are all part of the same type of system that Kubiak will be trying to run with the Saints. And because of how the system runs, it does take some burden off of the offensive line. We've seen it run in other teams for multiple seasons now, where these teams are having very high production despite not having a great offensive line. So if it's done well, it can mask some of the deficiencies a little bit. Now, with that said, probably a big difference in quarterback in some of these spots as well, when you're looking at Derek Carr versus who these teams have had, as well as the play caller and experience and weapons around him. So again, that's why when I'm kind of going back to the 49ers light and putting emphasis on the light part of it, I could see how it could kind of take away and mask some of those deficiencies, but I could also see how it could kind of turn into a disaster with this positional switch at the tackle spot.
Well, those teams you talk about, Brock Purdy can move around a little bit. Tua not necessarily moves a lot, but he has a lot of speed around him. Sure. That is able to get around him. And then you talk about the Rams. Well, Matt Stafford got blown up a couple of years ago and missed half the season. And so that just kind of goes to what I'm saying. I just think that, and we have a huge question mark at left guard. We have no idea who's going to play left guard for this team as we sit here on May the 31st. I mean, it's super concerning, but, do you think that the running game will be able to find a way to get around this? And Kamara now entering where he's 29 years old and I believe his 8th year in the league. Jamal Williams, who was a huge disappointment last year. We don't know what Kendra Miller is. This running game is going to have to be much better than it was last year.
I think Kendra Miller could be sneaky good.
Yeah, I agree.
He didn't quite get the amount of time I thought he might last season, perhaps in this offense, which is giving running backs a lot more opportunities than what we'll see or what we saw last year. I mean, just personnel-wise, last year the 49ers, multiple running backs, 2 or more in the backfield, 36% of snaps. And like you said earlier, the Saints, 0%. They didn't call any plays like that all season long. So there's going to be more opportunities for these guys to rotate through. I would be very optimistic about Miller. I think if his role increases, that could be a very good thing for the Saints. Again, Williams, he's 2 seasons removed from 17
touchdowns. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think, again, he was a guy that was kind of misutilized last year too. And then as optimistic as I want to be, like you think about the role that McCaffrey has in San Francisco. Again, we're using the light moniker in a very strong way. Alvin Kamara, certainly the way that he can run and catch the ball, certainly fits that mold for this offensive system, which really emphasizes that position. And it's not going to be using him in the same way that we've seen him used with the Saints for the last 4 or 5 seasons, where it's 13 targets a game for 35 yards. That's not happening again in this offensive system. It's going to be a better spot for him. But like running backs get to 29, 30 in today's NFL, that production falls off a cliff in a big
question.
Way. So I really like Miller out of the backfield. And if I'm a Saints fan, I hope he gets more time.
And one thing we did see towards the end of the season that Miller, and he went through a period where he was injured for, an injured rookie is always a problem. Now, I'm a little biased because I covered Tajay Spears in high school. So I was a little upset that they didn't draft Tajay Spears instead of Kendra Miller. But I do think I agree with you. I think Miller could I don't want to say flourish isn't the right word, but I do think that he could become a huge part in this offense. And maybe even in the dump off spot, we see Carr's numbers and you look at him, the over under is now 30. These are numbers from DraftKings, by the way. 3,450 yards is his over under passing total. Now, you were telling me in a text that, you guys gave out the under on Carr, and I completely understand why. That's actually a pretty big number. You think of today's passing, and a lot of people just automatically think 4,000 for a decent quarterback. And this is no negative on Derek Carr, but if he doesn't have a lot of time to throw the ball, throwing for 3,450 yards is not going to be that easy of a thing to do.
Okay, so we gave out under 3,600 yesterday. So for the most part, it's come down about 150 yards since. I've seen some go a little bit further than that. Couple things went into this line of thinking. First of all, last year he played through about 8 different injuries, about 4 different times during the season. I was expecting him to.
Thanks for reminding me, Adam.
Came back every time. So he got the 3,800 last year in an offense that is going to have much more focus on the pass than what we are going to see this year. So that was kind of like, we're at 3,600. He got to 38 last year because of a big second half in week 18 playing through all those injuries. I thought it was a high number to begin with. Second thing here, more emphasis on the run game. I think more emphasis on pre-snap motion as well. That is inevitably going to slow down the offense. We're going to see the pace of play come down. We're going to see slightly fewer plays per game, more emphasis on the run, less emphasis on the pass, less opportunities for yardage. I think that also plays into why, comparing to last year, we could see these numbers come down a little bit for Carr. And then the third was, I would say, a little bit more just kind of subjective and on the side, kind of hoping things might play out this way. You're hearing the increased role of Taysom Hill. There was the draft of Spencer Rattler this year behind him. You have a brutal opening schedule with kind of an era change with Kubiak coming in to replace Carmichael. The Peyton Carmichael Saints of old, that's kind of now gone and in the rearview mirror. This tends to be a little bit more of a new offense. If the Saints end up with this brutal schedule, I hate to say it for Saints, maybe you end up starting 1-6. Last year, there was certainly a rift between Carr, players on the team, coaches question on the sideline. Is there perhaps maybe an influence if things are going really poorly to give some of these other quarterbacks a little bit more time on the roster, which, of course, would take away from Carr? So, to me, a lot of ways that this under can get home.
We'll give you a little insight here on the Dattitude podcast and NOTAs, especially this week. It looks, again, it's early. It's still May. We're not even into June yet, but it looks like Jake Haener is kind of cementing his role, I believe, as the number 2 quarterback. Spencer Rattler has had a rough start to OTAs, as one might expect. I'm not going to go into my whole spiel about how I think that was a wasted pick. You already have a backup quarterback. Why do you need Spencer Rattler? But it does look like Jake Haener is, at least to this point, and he has an advantage because he's not a rookie anymore. But it does look like he's becoming, and he could play a role in this. I mean, he's obviously more mobile. Maybe they find ways to get him in. I don't know. And maybe, look, you talked about Derek Carr coming back and playing injured. There were at least 3 games last year where we were outwardly debating why wasn't Jameis Winston being used in those spots. And I think that maybe with a new OC in here, if those same sorts of things happen, I think you're going to see a better chance and less stubbornness, less unwillingness to go to a backup quarterback, at least for a game or two. So that also influences that number that you're talking about.
Interesting. Okay. Was the Carr perceived rift with coaches and other players, was that a real thing, or was that just overblown storyline last season?
I think that Carr, it was more of a heat of the moment sorts of things. I don't think there were rifts during practice or anything. I think, you've talked about his instances with the Raiders and how he didn't necessarily get. I think that the fact that he had blown up at times, maybe a little bit too harsh, but got a little overheated, I guess, during games. I think that it got to the point where they were so bad that it was happening often, and they were just getting tired of it, and they couldn't handle it anymore. And so I think that his problems with the way that they were calling offensive schemes, and we saw, I don't know if you noticed this, and I know you don't follow the Saints on it. You're not watching every play from the Saints, but when Carr was directing the offense on his own, when they were behind and Carmichael was basically, the hell with it, you go and run this offense and just go, they flowed much better. They were a much better offense when Carr was just taking the reins, sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops into this year, because I don't think Klint Kubiak is going to be like that. I think he's going to be more involved, even when, you're down 14 points or 17 points or whatever it is. So that will be interesting to see how it develops. But I like what I've seen. Again, it's very early. People say whatever, they're going to say all the right things, but I like the rapport. It seems that he's building along with Klint Kubiak. He is definitely a guy who I think at least goes into a situation positive. We make fun of his, let's keep it positive, brother, thing. And so I at least I like what I say so far, but I don't know what that means for this number. Again, all the things you mentioned with the running game and Taysom Hill, and potentially we talk about this offensive line, I think the under 34.50, even though you got it at 3,600, I still think it's a value at 34.50.
Okay. It may be also worth considering now that number's come down. I see touchdowns 21.5.
It's 23.5 at another place. So that's something you would shop around for.
So you're thinking more run attempts, more potentially
Absolutely.
scheme change within the red zone specifically with a guy like Williams, or perhaps you have Hill getting more snaps in the backfield. And instead of going the yardage way, you could look at the touchdowns as an alternative.
I absolutely agree with that, because I think that one thing in the red zone I remember a specific drive towards the end of the season where they threw they got to the 8-yard line, threw 2 straight fades to Olave back left corner of the end zone that didn't work. Then they threw it to the right side and kicked the field goal. So, I mean, and that's kind of where they were. And exactly. And I think that you are going to see more bull rushing. Jamal Williams is, even though he's a disappointment last year, I'd be surprised if he doesn't have 6 or 8 touchdowns this year. We'll see how that works out. All right, let's talk about this over under 7.5. Now, I think we both know at least where I'm leaning, and I think you're going to agree, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. 7.5 with this brutal start. I just don't see how they get to 8, Adam. I really don't, because I hope I'm wrong. Again, it's more fun to cover a team that's winning than cover a team that's losing, obviously. So I think for this team to have any chance to win 8 or more games, they've got to go 2-3 through that aforementioned stretch. Not saying they can't do it, because I'm not sure how good Dallas is going to be without a running game. And Philadelphia had its issues last year, and they've lost some pieces as well. So those are 2 potential victories. Then, of course, Atlanta, they have a rough first 3 games as well. Maybe they come in here limping. Who knows? But if the Saints don't go 2-3 at the bare minimum, I don't see how in the world they get to 8 wins.
Yeah, I tend to lean under. I don't have a position on either side of this, but it is just, that start's just a killer. So I tend to agree with what you said there, but I just, man, I don't have a stance there one way or the other.
It's early. It's May. You may.
We'll see. Yeah, it's very
August,
early.
Who knows? Do you see anything, obviously to get to the playoffs, you need to win probably at the bare minimum 9 games. So a plus 170 on the yes. If you did like the over, would you rather take them a chance to make the playoffs, especially the way that playoffs now are more expanded? Or would you, if you think they're going to win 9 games, would you rather put money on the over?
I would rather have the over than the playoffs in that specific instance. No question about that.
You think the NFC South is a 1 playoff team kind of division?
I think the Panthers are going to be much better than expected. I think the Panthers can actually contend for a wild card spot.
Really?
You
think they're going to take that big of a step?
I think that Dave Canales and Brad Idzik coming in from Tampa Bay really have the potential to get Bryce Young to the level we thought he was supposed to be at. Canales got Russell Wilson to his best career season. He got Geno Wilson the next year to a season better than anything Russ ever had in Seattle. And then he revived Baker Mayfield from the dead. The guy's a fantastic quarterback coach and just gets a lot out of offenses. And so to me, the Panthers this season represent the Jags in 2021 and that leap they took in 2022 after the bad coaching situation was removed. I think the Panthers are going to be much better than expected.
I think the over/under on the Panthers is 4.5. So you're telling me that you that's one of your better bets, the over.
Yeah.
Okay, before I ask you the final 2 questions on, there are 2 teams specifically I want to ask you about that I have opinions on. But the Saints aren't. We talked about this on Wednesday's show just a little bit, but they're getting no love from bettors. There was a report out. I don't remember who tweeted this. My producer Gabe had sent this to me, but the Saints are of all the teams that had winning records last year, the Saints are getting the least amount of love with no one betting on them. I mean, people are just staying away from the Saints, period. I mean, it's kind of strange almost to see that with a new, one of their weaknesses I thought was Pete Carmichael last year. And you get a guy in, and maybe I'm too high on Klint Kubiak. I don't know, but you would think you would see more bets on the Saints.
Was that a state specific report? Was that national?
It was
Do you know where?
it was
what
a
are we
national
looking at
tweet. I'm
sample
gonna
size
tell you right now as we do this live here on the show. But I saw. Let's see if I can tell you who as I try to do this.
I mean, of the 32 teams in the league, I would say from an interest standpoint going into this season, the Saints are very, very low, if not near the bottom of like intrigue and storylines. And so I could see just in general how that's not moving the needle. But that report could, if it's national, it could be very heavily influenced.
Ben Fawkes reported. Do you know him?
Yeah, I do. So that's probably a more like Vegas and Northeast regulated book market reflection. So I think as we get closer to the season, those numbers will change a little bit. But they're just I'm sorry to say for Saints fans, it's not a very interesting team relative to the rest of the league going into this year, where people are 8 months in advance going to tie up their money for a year on an opinion.
I will say this: there are always 2 or 3 teams, right, that just kind of go ignored early on the season. If you want to find a positive, and I'm trying my best. Maybe the Saints are that team. You look at a Houston now, granted, no one knew how well CJ Stroud was going to play, but Houston last year, I don't think anyone in their right mind thought the Texans were going to do what they did and be able to put up the offensive numbers that they put up in the first year of D'Amico Ryans, who's a defensive coach. I just, that's one team you point to. I thought that Green Bay's rebound after the whole Aaron Rodgers debacle was kind of unexpected. I think people thought Detroit would be good last year, but I don't think they thought they would be that good. So if there are some positives to take, there are 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that highly overachieve each year.
That's definitely true. And perhaps part of the reason too is you have such a perceived to be dominant division front runner in Atlanta.
Yeah.
That when it comes down to how you can bet this team, the win totals in general, it tends to be a very sharp market because you have the 2 options and it's a season-long bet and you're tying your money up for a long time. There's not a big payout. And if you're looking at all the other options, is the average bettor going to say the Saints are worth the bet to beat the Falcons when people have so much confidence in Atlanta this season? Probably not. And if you're not going to be able to get to that number, well, you're probably not too comfortable betting them to win the conference or the Super Bowl. So like, I can see with kind of the division being shadowed by Atlanta, why this could be a tough bet too, in addition to as much intrigue as there might be with the teams taking the lead.
Well, there's no doubt about that. All right, before I let you go this morning, I appreciate you taking this much time. There are a couple teams I want to talk about outside of the NFC South very briefly. Now, I do my own, and I'm sure you do a similar thing. I do my own strength of schedule formula based off of what the over-under win totals are. I'm not going to go into the detailed list, but basically my strength of schedule formula is a little different than just going based off of last year's winning percentage, which I don't think in the grand scheme of things is all that.
I agree.
So there are 2 particular teams that stood out to me when I was doing these numbers. And the problem, usually it's somewhat obscure and we have a nice little bet, but this time, the 2 teams that I really like are teams that other people like as well, but I still think there's value on them. And number 1 is the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you look at the strength of schedule according to my formula, the other 3 teams in the division all have strength of schedules in the top 8. They have 3 of the 8 toughest schedules in the NFL next year, according to my formula, are in the AFC North. And Pittsburgh has the toughest schedule in the entire NFL, according to this. But the Bengals, I think, are 22nd or 23rd. Adam, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but to me, again, we don't know how Joe Burrow is going to come out. He's had his injury troubles. Jamar Chase is looking for a new contract already. Those are things that could affect numbers. But I really like the Bengals. And as I look right now, they are plus 145. And I know that's not a great number, and I know that's not necessarily a value, which is what we always look for. But I actually think that is a value because I think they have an excellent chance to win this division and a team that could be in the hunt for the Super Bowl.
I I'm not going to fully disagree with it. I will say that win total wise, they're at 10.5 off the top of my head.
Yeah,
it's
10.5.
I think it's a big number that accounts for how easy the schedule looks to play out. I think there's questions about what the defense is going to look like. They had some major issues last year that'll have to take a step forward. I actually think the biggest competition for them inside the division is going to be Cleveland. I think Baltimore, with everything that
100% agree,
is going to take a bit of a step backwards as well.
Agree.
It's going to be a deadly offense in Baltimore, but it's the expectations for Cincinnati are very, very, very high this year. That's for sure. Which worries me that some of the ease of schedule is already priced in.
And you talk about Baltimore. I actually absolutely love. This is not one of my teams, but I love the under 11.5 wins, even though it's minus 165 at DraftKings. I love that number because we've seen often that the Ravens will come off of a fantastic year and follow it up with an average year. And I think
Baltimore is going to be incredibly high scoring week to week. I really believe that the loss of McDonald is massive for that defense, but that offense is going to be deadly in year 2 under Monken.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right. The other team, again, is another team that a lot of people like, but it's the same similar thing. When you look at the other 3 teams in the division, they all have fairly tough schedules, but somehow the Jets are the 28th easiest schedule along my formula. Now, I know they start off with the 49ers, but then they go through a stretch where they could easily navigate. Their over-under win total of DraftKings right now is minus 150. I mean, is 9.5, minus 150. Again, not a great value per se, and we're counting on Aaron Rodgers to stay healthy, right? But I think the Jets could start out like 5-1 or something along those lines and make a run to this division title. I love that number.
If they win week 1 against San Francisco and the Rodgers homecoming and Robert Salah going back, the Jets will be the last undefeated team in the NFL this season. I have a lot of confidence in that and how that week 1 game could set up a big run for the Jets and have them really stacking wins through the month of October. Gets a little bit difficult towards the end, but they could really get in a very good spot if they get through San Francisco. That's a massive, massive, massive week 1 game. Can't overstate that enough. Huge, huge implications from that one. I think it's a top 3 roster in the NFL. I think it's very hard to debate that it is not. Obviously, with any win total, you're going to need the quarterback to be healthy the whole season if it's going to go over. Very seldom do you see a major quarterback injury and a team still go over. That's kind of like the table stakes to playing an over that you have to buy into and believe in. I think there's as much, if not more than any other quarterback before, personal motivation working in favor of Aaron Rodgers to come back and prove that he can still play and he is healthy. I think it's a very real thing for how he's positioned himself. And so this is it for the entire Jets staff, for how this team was built the last 2 years. If it does not go well, everyone's job is on the line and we'll see massive changes. So I think I completely agree with your stance on the Jets. I'd love to be in a spot to disagree. I think it makes for good media, but I agree with that for sure.
By the way, RJ Bell shouted you out for that undefeated run. I don't know if you know that or not on his podcast. RJ Bell was talking about how you were talking about that could be a great bet on the last team to be undefeated. Just, I don't even know if you know that.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, so you're getting shouted out by
it's building. It's building.
Yeah, it is. Let's get crazy here. They're number 11 in order of Super Bowl odds at plus 2,000. Is that a good number
for New York?
Yeah.
I would rather go conference or division. I think.
I know you don't bet a whole lot of Super Bowl futures.
No, not typically.
Most handicappers don't.
I think looking at division odds, that's a bit more intriguing.
Yeah.
If how you're looking at it, the win totals move quite a bit too.
Yeah, plus 165, I believe. Lastly, does Aaron Rodgers, does this whole thing kind of remind you a little bit about when Brett Favre went there? You know, this is like the last chance, the last hurrah. Does it remind you of that a little bit?
No, not exactly. And to be fair, that was a very young Adam when that happened. So like circumstances and familiarity are not as strong as this one. I don't know if there's a situation that is as comparable to this season for Rodgers for a quarterback ever, with the injury, with how the media is portraying it, with how the team is such a target, and how now trade deadline pushed back a little bit. You're likely going to see some changes and additions if things are going well to kind of fortify for that run. This is such a different year for the Jets relative to their history. So I don't know if I know enough to make that comparison.
Last question. Give me a value that we have not mentioned at all here on May 31st. If you want an early, summer, pre-summer bet and something we haven't talked about, just give us something you like.
Well, I wasted it earlier on the Panthers. I didn't know this was coming, but that's what I would have gone with and said. I really think they overachieve, and I think you can look at that. Whether you want to go Bryce Young passing yards over, that's an incredibly low number. That's like 3150. You can look at them 15-1 to win the division. You can look at their win total over 5.5. However you want to play it. Anything that's pro Panthers, I think, is a good bet.
Adam Chernoff with us on the Dattitude podcast. I'm telling you, go find him on YouTube, Right Angle Sports. You'll start watching and you won't stop. I mean, if you're an NFL fan and you're not just a Saints fan, if you're an NFL fan, you want to go out and watch, whether you care about betting or not, really, because he tells you the ins and outs of teams, things that you don't know. Adam Chernoff, thank you so much for joining us on the pod. We always welcome you back anytime you want to be on.
Thanks very much, Jim. Good to chat with you again.
That might have been best interview we've had in the 2024 calendar year. I mean, that's the way that I think about it. And again, obviously that was recorded earlier. So I should have said that before. We had some comments during the interview, at least towards the latter half. So I'll show them now and answer. I know you want to get to LSU, so we're going to end this show very shortly. But Jacques says 7 wins and Allen is likely gone. Does Kubiak and the new offensive staff we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, aren't we? I mean, you're asking if Kubiak stays if Allen gets fired. Look, I hear you. Jacques, I'm not putting you down at all. I promise you. I get the frustration, but you got to give Dennis Allen a chance here. As much as you hate Dennis Allen, it doesn't matter. You've got to give this team a chance. And I'm saying that as I'm giving you predictions that I think that this team is going to have a struggle to start. That's just my prediction. I'm not going to sit there and say that I'm rooting for them to lose or think, things happen. I mean, I was serious about surprise teams. Look at Houston last year. You see Adam talking about the Carolina Panthers. Maybe they're the surprise team. Maybe they're the ones that should be betting on to win the division. I don't know. Every year, there are 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 teams where every handicapper, every prognosticator, everyone who thinks they know what the hell they're talking about, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And they surprise you. Could be the New Orleans Saints. If they navigate that tough stretch, again, I don't think they will. I'm not really betting. I'm not going to bet on or against this. I can tell you that right now. We give our opinions of numbers, and we love to show numbers because, I mean, that's where we come from. I mean, I spent 2 years as sports betting writer, and before moving on, and this has become my full-time job now, 2.5 years. So, and betting has been a part of what I do. I've written an NFL column, weekly NFL column for 10 years now about what I think is going to happen any given week. So I'm telling you what I think is going to happen. However, it would not shock me at all if the Saints are better than I think they're going to be. And I'm not betting on this number. I can give you my opinion, but I'm not betting on the over under 7.5. I'm just not. I'm not betting anything on the Saints, against or on. I usually do because I usually have a strong opinion. I've been wrong the past couple of years. I let things influence my opinion last year. I was going to say under last year, and I kind of got caught in the hype train again, and I ended up going over, and I was wrong. So, but I'm not betting on or against them this year. So, Jacques, I get where you're coming from. Ask me that later. Ask me in late September, early October. Let's see how they start the season. Ask me if I think they're going to blow it up and if Kubiak stays, if Allen gets – not talking about what happens if Allen gets fired, because it's much more fun to, as I said, to cover a winning team than a losing team. And I don't want Allen to get fired. If he gets fired, that means they stunk. I don't want him to stink. Dylan, rather everyone count us out. We perform better. When they hype us up, we usually don't do anything. Well, if you want them to not be hyped up, you got it. No one is hyping up this team. Not anyone here. Well, almost no one in New Orleans except for the straight up homers, and there are some. There are some straight up homers out there. Just giving you tell you the way that it is, at least the way that I think it is. You're also saying that the Falcons going to fail Con. I don't know, man. I hope they do because it's fun, but they got a pretty good roster. There's a reason why they're overwhelming, and it's overwhelming. Even though they're, I think, minus 110 or minus 120 now, it's dropped a little bit to win the division. The next team is the Bucks, and they're like plus 275. There's a major gap between the Falcons and Bucks on who's going to win the NFC South. It's not close. That's why you call them the overwhelming favorites. They are. Does it mean they're going to win the division? No. But I think they're the favorite for a reason. If I were putting together the odds, I certainly would make the Falcons the favorite. And as we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about my strength of schedule that I mentioned to earlier. The Falcons have not only, according to my formula, the easiest schedule this year in the NFL, but they have the easiest schedule in the last 3 years in the NFL. That says something. Jeff, I think 7-10 unless Carr has a breakout year. Hope he does. I don't think it's about Carr. I think 7-10, that's about where I'd put him. 7-10, 6-11. But I don't think it's about Carr. I think he can't have a breakout year if they don't protect for him. Are they going to protect for him? Not with this offensive line. Go ahead, surprise me, shock the hell out of me. But I hope this team is taking this seriously and not going to be stubborn like we've seen Saints teams in the past be stubborn, right? Oh, people in the media are saying we need to go get a free. Sometimes I swear to God, I know I swear to God, I know, but it sounds dumb. But sometimes I think they're just stubborn. They say, we're going to do it this way. We're not going to go spend any money on another tackle. We don't need that. I swear they just seem like they're stubborn like that sometimes. LSU is underway, by the way. Gage jump strike out. We're gonna end this show so you can go watch it. But we got to get to the extra point first. I appreciate all the comments and everyone paying attention to Adam. The number has kept rising throughout his piece there. You want to watch the extra point? Don't go anywhere. Today is a special anniversary in Saints history. I mentioned it earlier. But before I get to that anniversary, I got to tell you just a little bit more about my friends at Evangeline Securities. We told you how it works. If you're thinking of selling your business, Evangeline can help you figure out how much your business is worth with a complimentary service that includes a detailed evaluation. If you decide to proceed, then they will begin an extensive auction process and involve established private equity funds. Say that 10 times. See? Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I got it right. Private equity funds from across the world. And they will then maximize the return process for the founder of your company and for the family. That's what Evangeline's going to try to do. I say I feel like I'm a part of the Evangeline family. But here's what we didn't say earlier, and we stressed this. Evangeline Securities is the top producer on their platform. And beyond that, there are very few companies. You go check it out. There are very few companies like them in this area. They also have an office in Lafayette, Poydras Street and Lafayette. Very few companies like them here, and none with their dedication and success. They are fully licensed and ready to serve you. So before you make your plans for where you're going to spend your Saturdays and Sundays in the fall, you have plenty of time to talk to managing directors Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt about what's really important the rest of your life. That's what's really important. not Saints, not LSU, the rest of your life. Check them out at www.evangelinsecurities.com. Okay, before we wrap up the show today, I told you it was a special anniversary of sorts. Many consider November 1st, 1966, the most iconic day in the history of the New Orleans Saints, as it was the day the team was born. However, for today's extra point, I take you back 39 years to what I consider the most important day in the franchise's existence, and unquestionably so, of all the things that have happened with the black and gold off the football field. In fact, May 31st, 1985 was the day Tom Benson officially purchased the Saints from John Meekum, which ensured the team would remain in New Orleans for many years to come. Not Jacksonville, not Phoenix, not St. Louis, or wherever else they were talking about going. They stayed in New Orleans. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and Governor Edwards stepping in to help save the deal by convincing the state house to give in on potential future concessions. But without the sale to Mr. Benson, the sports world in this city would have been inconceivably different today. Not only would there have never been a Super Bowl celebration 14 plus years ago, but New Orleans would have become just another city in the world of sports. With absolutely no offense to LSU or Tulane or any other university in and around South Louisiana, but there wouldn't have been much else to locally root for had May 31st, 1985 never happened. In fact, I think it's obvious that had Mr. Benson not saved the Saints, we wouldn't have an NBA team here either. We almost certainly wouldn't have had the past 4 Super Bowls that were played here, nor would we have the upcoming game in New Orleans. No Desmond Howard running crazy for the Packers in Super Bowl 31. No beginning of Tom Brady's legacy in Super Bowl 36. Instead, it might have happened in Tempe, Arizona, or Miami, or Detroit. What? And the lights never would have gone out in one of the greatest championship football games ever played in Super Bowl 47. In fact, what would have happened to the Superdome? Thankfully, we don't have to know the answers to those questions because Tom Benson saved us from having to wonder about all that once again on May 31st, 1985. And don't get me wrong, Mr. Benson didn't just do it for his hometown, although I'm sure that was a big reason. It helped cement his financial empire, as that $70.2 million he spent 39 years ago is worth approximately $4.1 billion today. For those who are mathematically challenged like me, that is a $4,100 million from a $70 million investment. That's pretty good, isn't it? A return on your investment of more than 58 times. I wouldn't have to do this show. Oh, yeah, I'd still just do the show. It's fun. What would we talk about on Mondays in the fall? What would we look forward to in June, July, and August? With no Dattitude, I'm not the one with the $4,100 million. With no Dattitude, what kind of podcast would you listen to? So today we celebrate the first rebirth of the New Orleans Saints. Excuse me. And who knows, even though I'm on a diet, I may just have a piece of cake, black and gold piece of cake. You should go ahead and do the same. All right. You're going to go watch LSU. We're going to wrap it up here before I go over Klint for this Friday and for this short week. Weird. It was a weird short week. Seems like Wednesday, but it's not. It's Friday. I want to thank today's guest, Adam Chernoff. And as always, we thank Gabe Henderson behind the scenes. We hope you can join us Monday. We're going to talk about LSU, hopefully winning this regional. A reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page and click the little bell to receive notifications when we go in the air live. And you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. Have a wonderful weekend. Go Tigers. We'll see you Monday. Take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.